Baribeau here, season 2 of Sunday Soul. I am so thrilled to bring you my friend. She's one of the stars of Barstool, and we'll talk about that conglomeration, this kind of media giant that they've been coming into. Kayce Smith. Kayce, how are you, love?
I'm fantastic. It's been way too long since I've seen you in real life. And I know with like the COVID situation, that's probably not going to be fixed anytime soon. But once it is, like, I just need to give you a big hug. It's been too long.
You seem like to me probably the same type of person that I am. Like, I exist on hugs. I feed off of people. I'm an empath. So I think that's been the part of COVID that I've struggled with a little bit. As much as it's been awesome to connect with people here, I've really I remember the first time I hugged somebody halfway through the pandemic. I went to my best friend's house with their kids and we held on and we didn't let go, Kayce.
No. Yeah, no, I said that early on because I'm in New York City and I live by myself. So the guy I was dating at the time, my friends, they were all over the country. So I was by myself and I said the saddest thing to me, but which also the truth was I could not wait to hug somebody. It was something I didn't realize I was going to miss as much as I did. So that first hug that I was able to give after weeks of being by myself in quarantine was by far the best hug. I will never take it for granted again.
You know, I've said to people lately, I've said, if you lose the lesson during quarantine, if we just go back to being the same people that we were before this worldwide pandemic, I think we've lost something, right? If you're not changed by this in some way, somehow, what has the quarantine taught you?
It's a great question. And you're so right. If we don't learn lessons from this, I don't know what we're doing, because I actually think about this a lot. I don't think we truly realize the impact of what's happening to the maximum degree that it's going to be, even though we feel like we're living it every day. And I feel like the things that I've really learned is just not to take certain things for granted, like family and friends and staying in communication. And then also realizing some things I really put high on my importance list were not that important. I love to work out. I think it's very important for your mental health, for your physical health, but I was almost putting so much on the fact that I couldn't go to the gym early on as something that was depressing to me. It's people have been working out without gyms for their entire life. There are things to focus on that you don't need to put so much emphasis on every single day. But I think for me, it was just taking for granted the fact that we have the freedom that we do, that we can go in and watch sports at a bar and enjoy our friends, or that, I don't know, just going to the grocery store, all of those things that I've done my entire life that I never thought twice about doing were taken away. And I realized wow, I should thank God more often for the life I get to live. And so that's what I try to do, even though more things have opened up.
It's funny you talk about the gym. Through the pandemic, and even now, I was teaching athletes and people all over the country. I had this mantra, and it was, do the best you can with what you have to the best of your ability, look for somebody to help, and then rest. And if you do that every single day, it so much so it affected so many people that a girl painted it and sent it to me, in a painting, Kayce.
I'm about to say, can I get it tattooed on my body? That's what I need.
What are those tattoos? And you were talking about the gym, and some of my athletes, I told them, I said, do the best you can, man. And some of them were pushing cars to work out. That's all they had. They were swimming in creeks. They were doing whatever they could to be able to keep the weight on, and eating whatever they could to be able to keep the weight on. And so, that's neat. You pivoted. You figured it out, Kayce.
Yeah, but early on, I feel I put so much of my thought process into the fact that I couldn't go to the gym, and it almost just ate me alive. It's something so small, and I realized this is not important in the grand scheme of things. But once I just got moving, once I was just doing things in my apartment that made me feel better, I was oh, you can adapt and adjust to anything. That's what human beings do. But I just feel because you get so used to your habits and you get so used to being able to do whatever you want on a daily basis, when all of it got taken away at the same time, all of a sudden, I didn't know how to react. I just had no clue how to adjust. And I learned how to do that pretty quickly. And we all have to. I mean, we had no choice. But the fact that people were out there pushing cars makes me feel I was totally slacking. I was lifting gallons of water because I was I don't have dumbbells. I guess I'll gallons of water from the CVS. What am I supposed to do?
I just snorted. It's a good chat when I've already snorted 10 minutes in. So I don't even know how to pivot from that because it's so funny, but it is a topic that I want to touch on, because I believe, and I know obviously you just talked about it, you're a proponent of health and wellness. And one of the things that I think has been sorely missing, and it's why I just started this super informal 21-day challenge to set a new goal and threw it out there to people and said, hey, who wants to move at least for 20 minutes for the next 21 days, set a new habit, set a new goal. But I feel like that during the pandemic, we have talked so much about vaccines and masks and everything else. We're now talking about mental wellness and physical wellness and all of those things. But Kayce, you are a cancer survivor. You are a freaking warrior. You're a cancer survivor.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will always say, like, I say this all the time, like, I'm one of the lucky ones because, they caught it, not super early, but early enough for me where I was able to get through it without having to go through years and years of treatment. But I mean, that's always in the back of my head when I go through these things. It's like, I've been through something much worse for me and my family than what I'm currently going through now. And so I try to go back to that mindset and remind myself that, there was a point in time where I wasn't sure if I was going to be alive, if I wasn't going to be able to carry on my normal life. And so the pandemic, as much as it absolutely stinks, and there are so many things that I couldn't stand about it, it was still kind of the process in the back of my head of like, well, you're not fighting cancer anymore. You're not dealing with the things that you could have potentially dealt with. And like I said, I was able, to get through that process much faster than majority of people who are diagnosed with cancer. But it does give me more of a perspective. Like, okay, I can't go to the gym today. All right, you're fine. You're not doing spot radiation on your back and watching your parents cry because they don't know what's next for their daughter. So that helped me a lot to put that into perspective.
If you wouldn't mind, for anybody who's walking through it right now, it took my mom, and it's a terrible disease, but I would love, because you are so full of strength and light, I would love if you wouldn't mind sharing your cancer journey, how you found out, what you did, and what you learned from it.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. You and I love our SEC football. We love college football in general. So like, I love to be able to tie all of these things in my life together. I know, like, I just took off God bless the Big Ten shirt off because that's what I was wearing earlier. Because thank God they're finally back. But so I was working for TexAgs, which is when I met you at SEC Media Days. So I was, right out of school, and I was at Ole Miss for the A&M Ole Miss game when Johnny Manziel was still there. So of course, like, mayhem all the time. And long story short, this woman who was multiple rows behind me saw me take a jacket off and noticed a spot on my shoulder. It was a flat birthmark I had had my entire life. She couldn't get down on me because that game ended up ending on like a walk-off field goal. And it was just a crazy, crazy ending. And she tracked my number down. She tracked TexAg's studio number down, called me the next week and said, hey, I know this is weird, but I'm a dermatologist and I recognized you from your work on TexAgs, and I think you need to go see somebody. What are you talking about? Like, this is crazy. And the only thing, it's insane. The only thing that had happened to me is like, that was in, early fall. All summer, I had been exhausted. Like, every single day, no matter if I got 12 hours of sleep or 6 hours of sleep or no sleep, I was ready to pass out. My body was just always just exhausted. And I thought it was weird. I got every test possible, my thyroid, anything that they could do. And they're like, we don't really know what's going on, but your body's doing something. So when I went to the dermatologist, they immediately did a surgery on me there. And, a lot of times people get a mole cut off or whatever, and they say, okay, like, we'll see what happens. They immediately said, okay, well, we're going to send you to MD Anderson in Houston. Like, you need to see an oncologist because we can tell that this has already spread. We can't do anything else here. So for the next couple months, I was traveling to Houston, which is not far from College Station. I was seeing my oncologist. And when I first went to him, they did not know if it was going to be all over my body or not. So they did another marginal surgery, and they said, we've got to go do the big one, and we're going to see if it's in your lymph nodes. And at that point, they thought that it potentially could be. Because, once melanoma starts spreading, it is hard to stop. If you catch it early, it's easy.
Yes.
But it's one of those really fast spreading things once it gets in your lymph nodes. And my last big surgery, so I did spot radiation on my back. And then if my lymph nodes were to come back with the cancer in it, I was going to have to enter chemo. Well, praise Jesus, because like I said, had no idea this was going on. My lymph nodes came back clean. So I was able to not have to go into the chemo process and not have to really fight it all over my body. Just more like, I have this wicked scar, Rachel. It looks like a shark just like bit my entire back out. But the whole thing for me was I had no idea what was going on in my body. And my oncologist said, well, your body's been fighting off cancer spreading. That's why you've been so tired. Those are the early stages of it starting to spread more than just a mole on your arm or on your back. And what I realized is that I had a true angel, because she was just some stranger who happened to know who I was from some, random internet video. And she truly saved my life. And I would have never known that was happening to me. And so that's why I speak out so much about it, because, a lot of people will say, like, well, I mean, you didn't have to go through the whole process. People lose their lives. It's like, yeah, but like, I could have had that woman not cared enough to track me down. So every time I go to Oxford, I start sobbing my eyes out. I always go sit exactly where I was, because it's just, I mean, she truly saved my life. And so I go back to my oncologist every 6 months. I go back down to Texas because I love him so much. Shout out Dr. Ross. And, you know, just just keeping myself monitored, make sure it didn't come back.
So, a lot to unpack there.
It's a long story. And I'm like, I'm so used to saying it. I'm like, okay, too many details.
But it's so beautiful. And the first thing I think is, okay, I've had these conversations with people a ton. And that woman was sent for you.
Mm-hmm.
She was sent for you.
Crying again.
She was sent for you, Kayce. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
No, nobody else is supposed to sit in that chair. I believe angels, or whatever it is you believe, God reminded her to track you down, to call you. They didn't send a construction worker to sit in that chair, an engineer to sit in that chair. They sent a dermatologist. God sent a dermatologist. And when people ask, we're both people of faith, and we're going to talk about that. When people ask, is God real? Like, all I want to do is like put your story on repeat, because he sent a dermatologist to sit behind you, and not only to sit behind you, to track you down. In a world where we are 2 seconds flat, the attention span of a gnat, she tracked you down. It's just insane to me. And for me, it's like, I know you know this, but you're a walking miracle.
Oh, I know. And you're going to make me cry. Like, first of all, by the way, like, this totally makes sense why you're a motivational speaker. I already knew that, but like, just listening to you talk, I'm like ready to run through a wall. But no, and I think, you know, you hit the nail on the head. Like, when people ask me why I believe in God, and I know we'll get to the faith stuff in a little bit, it's not about religion to me. It's about the fact that there was something that was supposed to save me. And I believe that can only be from a higher being, which I believe is Christianity and is God. Because like I said, like, this spot was on my back my entire life. It wasn't raised. It wasn't some weird color. It was just something that was a tiny bit off that set this woman into motion to be able to truly save my life. And I ran into her 6 months after I went into remission. I was with my dad at an A&M baseball game, because Rob Childress, who's the head baseball coach at A&M, his wife Amanda had the same surgery I did 2 different times. So she came and sat with my family when I was going through my biggest surgery. So she became a family friend. And on my 6-month remission anniversary, they wanted to treat us to a baseball game. And we ended up running into this woman. So again, God thing, like, this doesn't happen normally. And my dad, who is, you know, a very funny, you know, he shows his emotions, but he's not a crier. I saw these tears just start falling down his cheek, and he just kept telling this woman, thank you so much for saving my daughter's life. And for me, like, how can you not believe in God at that point? Because if there was nobody watching out for me, if I didn't have an angel, a guardian angel, like, I would have been in a much different situation at MD Anderson months or maybe years down the line, where it could have been too late. But instead they were able to catch it with just a few surgeries. And I've just got some scars all over my body, but they're reminders of that faith, because I got a second chance for a reason, and somebody gave that to me.
You know, one of the things that I teach now in the movement, and I always, you know, lived fully, right? Like, I always lived like that anyway. But, and I know a lot of different people can relate to this, but particularly with cancer, if you've been through a cancer journey yourself, or you've loved somebody that's had cancer, one of the things, the beautiful lesson I learned with my mom is no regrets, none. We're going to take the trip. We are going to dance in the kitchen. We're going to write this down. We're going to laugh. We're going to cry. We're going to do it. And so I now impart that wisdom to people. And for young athletes, I give them the example of, very sadly, Kobe Bryant. I said, he did not wake up that day. He had everything to live for, right? That all those families on that plane, on that helicopter, never thought that they were going to crash into that mountainside. You are never promised another day, right? Like, you just don't know. So no regrets. And it's the way, Kayce, that I deal with my mother's death, that and faith, that I know I'll see her again one day. But we didn't have any regrets. We took the trips. We laughed. We danced. We did it all. I guess it's as simple as, would you agree, or is there another lesson that cancer taught you?
No, I agree. And I've told you this before, you know, in our private conversations, that your strength throughout everything that you've dealt with has always been so admirable to me. And just, the fact that even like we reconnected, this summer, because I happened to be wide awake in the middle of the night when you were tweeting about your own struggles and your own battles. That's something that I feel like so few people that have not dealt with something that you've dealt with even understand that you need to put that in practice. Because if you live your life every single day calculated, not doing what you truly want to do with your life, you don't know if you're ever going to be able to do that. And Kobe, is a very sad example, but it's perfect for athletes because it's like this guy was on top of the world. He had so much left to do. And, his daughter being the same way and all the families on that helicopter, but you just don't know what's going to happen. And I remember, and like I said, like I'm very aware I was so lucky to get it caught early, but I remember looking at my mom and my dad when we were sitting in the waiting room at MD Anderson and them just kind of trying to figure out what to even say to me. And I told them, I said, say what you need to say. I don't care if you cry. I don't care if we're laughing. Just say what you need to say, because this silence to me is not going to do anything, because we don't know what we're about to be told. And of course we were told good news, after the last surgery, but if we had been told bad news, I still wanted to know what they were thinking. And so I think that just living, like you do, like dancing around and like I have, where I'm making these career risks that have ended up paying off. So, so far we'll see what happens, but just doing something where if something was to happen to me tomorrow, not only would I feel good when I get to the pearly gates in heaven that I took those risks, but also the people around me that I can impact, that I lived my life to the fullest. And you can't do that if you're trying to calculate and control everything. You just simply can't.
You are so right. And I'll say this before we talk about your great risk, because it's so inspiring. I was listening to this financial planning show, back in our days where we drove all over the place, covering high school games, covering this. We were a one-man band. We were doing everything ourselves. There'd be times I'm like, okay, I need a break from, sports talk. And I'd switch the channels on Sirius. And it was this financial show. And this person called in, this dad, and he said to this person, he said, I have paid off all the credit cards except one. I just have one left. I've done all this. I just have one left. And I want to take my kids to Disney World. And the person that was the expert said, absolutely no way, no how. Pay off the credit card. And I have never forgotten the story. I'm like, dude has paid off 75, 80% of his debt, and he wants to take his kids to Disneyland. I'm like, it's not all about checks and balances and money. And yes, you need to be smart. And yes, you need to be prudent. And yes, you need to save. But man, if you've come that far and you want to take your kids to Disney World, take your kids to Disney World, because at the end of the day, you're not going to be thinking about checks and balances. You're going to be thinking about the laughter of your children and the time you spent with your family or the time you didn't.
Exactly. And I feel like, there's just this whole blurred line of like what we're supposed to put as higher importance than other things. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about with quarantine, that I figured out really quickly, like what my fall wardrobe looks like is not near as important as if like calling my mom to talk to her for the 5 minutes that I would be online shopping, things like that you put such a high regard for. You realize, like, does it really matter if I get another jacket from this online store? And I feel like when I look back at my childhood, and that's the one thing, like of all the issues I've had in my life and everything that I've gone through, I have the best childhood on the planet. My parents are absolute saints. And all the best memories I have were those types of vacations. And as I've gotten older, I've learned that there were times where my parents were maybe strapped for money, but they put my sister and I first. And those are the memories that I have. And I look back at even just being able to go to the school that I was able to go to, and they never sent me with any debt at all from college. That put them in a really hard situation, but they wanted to give their children that freedom once we graduated school. So like anybody who's listening, who's like, should I pay that credit card off right this second? Or should I take my kids or my husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, friends to a memory they'll always remember? Always go with that, as long as it's not putting you in a situation where it's going to destroy your life, because those are the memories you remember. Not that your credit card wasn't paid on October the 20th or whatever date you're looking at. Those memories matter so much more.
Man, we could go on and on about that. That's woo! Preach, sister. I'm like, that's freaking awesome. So risk taking. I have found the when I am the most afraid in my life, but yet, and I say there's like some quote about it, and I'm not going to say it exactly, but it's basically like courage is not the absence of fear, it's moving in the face of fear. And fear is a natural, I was talking to my therapist the other day, and we'll get into mental health, but she was like, Rachel, doubt and fear are normal. Now, if the doubt and fear are accompanied by, talking negatively about yourself, or there's some, some beliefs that aren't good, then that's not normal. But she was like, doubt and fear are normal when you're making big life changes. I have found in my own life, Kayce, and I'm curious about you because you have taken some amazing risks and they put you in some amazing places. I found the greatest things have happened to me when I was terrified, when I was faking it till I made it, when I looked like I was calm and cool and collected on the outside, but on the inside, I was, ooh.
Yep.
Tell me about your risk taking and how it's gotten you to where you are today.
You and I are so similar because I can relate to that so well, because I feel like the moments where I feel the most out of control are the moments that you have to be the most controlled outwardly. And like, you've been in the media industry for a long time too. Like, I call it the red light drug, where it's like, once that red light comes on, everything has to be pushed down, because we're entertainers, we're actors, at this end of the day, my personal life could be swirling out of control. But once that red light comes on, you have to become somebody different.
Yeah.
And I felt like early on in my career, I was a sideline reporter for ESPN, which was a goal of mine I had had since I was really young. And I was so happy that I got to take that jump into my dreams coming true. But whenever that red light would come on, I still didn't feel as fulfilled as I thought that I should, because I felt like I was so nervous and I was constantly trying to prove myself, and it was showing outwardly, and it was showing, I would make little mistakes on air and it would eat me alive for just, days and weeks. And our mutual friend, it's the worst, right? Like Laura Rutledge, she was one of my best friends.
Love her.
Oh, she's the best. I would call her and I'd be crying and I would say, I said this one word wrong, and people on Twitter notice it. And she was like, who cares?
Who cares?
Put it behind you and move forward. And it's easier to say when it's not you doing it. But when I really started realizing that when I'm the most nervous, I can harness that into being my strongest, I realized that if I'm going to feel fulfilled whenever that light comes on and that microphone turns on, I'm going to have to take risks for myself. And so when when ESPN started to fall apart and they said, you're a sideline reporter, but you're really not that great at it either. And I started realizing, like, is this really what I want to do? And I decided that I wanted to go back into sports talk radio, which I know you have a great background in too. Preach it. Like, sports talk radio is the way to go. And going back and having to pay to work and not making money for, 6 or 7 months and really having to go back to my skill set and say, okay, like, this is a risk I'm taking because I feel so much more fulfilled, because this nervousness is going into being a successful person, not a disaster. So when I was on the sidelines with ESPN, I wasn't even enjoying it because I was so nervous all the time. Yep. And now I look back, and taking that risk landed me in Boston with NBC Sports, doing 15 hours of television a week, to now Barstool Sports. And instead of being just absolutely miserable, terrified, I'm terrified in a way that makes me feel fulfilled. And that's something that I was never going to have had I not taken that risk.
It feels like at Barstool that you're celebrated for being you, and you're put in different roles, and you can just be you. You said something about sideline reporting that I've often told people this. I'm like, first of all, it was hands down the hardest job I ever had. Okay. Oh. You are watching a game, trying not to get run over, listening to upstairs and listening to your person all at the same time. And secondly, frankly, I wasn't that good at it. Like, I'm like you, sports talk radio. That's where I started. That was my love. Now put me in a room for 3 hours and 4 hours and talk sports. We can do it. Right. Like, I didn't love it. And people, this is the funniest, Kayce. I don't know if you got this in your career. People would go, even up to a couple of years ago, they'd say, oh, honey, you're going to make it one day. You're going to be on TV and be a sideline reporter. And I would say, be graceful. And I'd say,
give me grace.
God give me grace. And I'd say, well, I'm the first female host on SiriusXM. So yeah, I'm kind of, done some neat things. But there was there's this weird thing in sports media for women that sideline reporting is like the echelon. Like, it's like the thing. Have you ever noticed that?
Oh yeah. And I've gotten the same thing too. And and I also, live in a world with Barstool where it's like, you either know what Barstool is or you've never heard of it before. Now we're at the point now where we're so big that it is a different feeling than when I first started. But whenever I went to Barstool and people were like, wait, you're going to leave NBC Sports Boston and you're going to go to this internet company? I was like, well, you do realize that the internet company's videos get like triple and quadruple the views of this linear show I was on just from like a random video of me walking around the office. But it was almost like this idea of like, well, you'll work for ESPN one day, which Laura, again, one of the closest people in my life to me, like, she's killing it at ESPN. I have lots of friends who are there. But I worked there too. Now I was much lower level, but I was like, oh no, I've already worked there.
Yeah.
This was the risk that was better for me. Cause I'm the same way. Like, I just wasn't that good at sideline reporting. Like, I was good enough to be put in that situation, but that was not my skill set. And I keep saying, like, I never felt fulfilled doing it. I was like, I'm here because I'm young, I'm blonde, and I love football. And that's totally fine. And I'm going to go do something that I love more. And if that fails, sideline reporting will be there. And so far I haven't gone back to that, but that's not the end all be all. The end all be all is finding what you love and carving it out to where you're the first, like you being the first one on SiriusXM like that. Like, that's so cool to be able to do. What I'm doing at Barstool, I feel the same way, you know, being able to host these shows with Deion Sanders and doing these things that I would have never been able to do had I just listened to what my stereotype was to be. And that was to just be a sideline reporter, which is very hard. Like you said,
hardest job.
That. Yeah.
You and Deion have like this genuine, I see it in the videos. Y'all genuinely love each other. Like, y'all have a genuine affection and this beautiful friendship that comes across very clearly.
Oh, well, I'm glad you recognize that, because I feel that way too. I'm like, am I just crazy, or like, you know, do people notice this? It's a mutual respect that I never truly expected to have with somebody of his caliber. I mean, I grew up in Dallas. You know, I grew up in Arlington, Texas. So when he was with the Cowboys, you know, I was wearing his jerseys to school. I was in elementary school. So he's like, you know, an icon to me. And when Dave Portnoy came over to me and he was like, hey, like, we're going to host this, we're going to do this NFL show with Deion Sanders. Like, would you be interested in hosting? And Dave's one of my good friends. And I looked at him and I said, Dave, like, in our friendship, you've asked me a lot of dumb questions here. This is the dumbest one by far. Like, what, I have something to do? Of course I will host a show with Deion Sanders. And Rachel, I was so nervous the first day that we went to set. And you know how some of the times these things can work. You have no time to like sit and get to know somebody. It's like you sit down, that red light comes on and you go, boom. And so like I sat down and he immediately stopped and was like, no, like, I want to give her a hug. I know who, you know, and we immediately connected as humans, as opposed to just co-stars. And what he's really shown me is, you know, that grace that you spoke about, and just having that faith no matter what throughout his entire career. And he's continued to be so successful. He's always leaned on that faith and that grace, which makes him treat everybody around him that same way. And so we've really connected on that level. And then of course, you know, we just talk about being, you know, I'm a Texas girl. He lives in Texas. He loves college football. I wanted him to get that Florida State job really bad. So we have a lot in common, but I'm learning that when you really live your life by faith and by grace around other people, you're immediately a magnet, no matter how big of a celebrity you are. And so now I'm like, wait, Deion Sanders is like my friend? Never thought that would happen.
Do you, my mantra was, my mantra in sportscasting, and even today when I'm around these coaches, is people are people. They put their pants on the exact same way. And so my thing was always, if I put you on a pedestal, I'm then hero worshiping you. No, I'm going to hug you, meet you, shake your hand, whatever it is, and treat you like a human being, right? Like, hey, Dale Jr., you know, or hey, Bo Jackson, or whatever it is. And people are like, oh, who? I mean, and funny enough, the only person I ever got starstruck with sports-wise was Phil Mickelson. Like, when he was walking
that's
by.
A pretty good one.
At the golf tournament, like, I froze up, like, I don't know why, and I love him, but for the most part, like 99.9% of the time, I think you treat somebody like a human being. And yeah, I mean, that's been my mantra. How do you do it?
The same thing. And people ask me all the time, like, who have you been most starstruck around? And mine, the person I can really truly remember being like, oh my God, what am I going to do, was Tom Brady, which I feel like it's a pretty good one, just even being in the room. But when it comes to sports, and I know you've been around a lot of big time athletes and coaches and figures in sports, like that's what we do for a living. Mm-hmm. So I feel like if I don't act like they're a human being, I don't act like they're a peer, then I'm not doing my job as well. Now, if like Justin Bieber walked in here, I don't know what I would do. Like, I'd probably faint or something. Like when it comes to like pop culture, I'm like, oh, that's a little bit different. But I feel like if you treat people like they're a human, because they are, and they're going through the same struggles that you're going through, and they have the family issues and the drama and the happiness and the joy, that you're able to connect with them, which ends up, you know, from a personal level being a really good thing, but also from a professional level, there is more respect there. Because if I showed up and was like sweating and freaking out in front of Deion, which would have been a natural response for how much I idolized him growing up, he wouldn't have taken me as seriously either. And so that's something that I've really taught myself, is like, it's about mutual respect, because he's a human being just like I am. He just happens to be a lot better at what he does. You know, he just happens to be very successful.
Hey, Rachel Baribeau here. If you love this video, please subscribe. You can also hit that little bell down there, and that will let you know every single time we go live. And one better, leave us a comment. And the ultimate, share it with a friend, because that's the power of social media. That's the power of good news. It travels fast. I love you guys. Thank you so much. See you next time.